This program is rated PG. It contains themes and scenes which may not be suitable for very young audiences. Parental guidance is advised.
We're working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Hello and welcome to ASEAN in Focus. This is Alma Angeles and coming to you live from Manila and Thailand. Here's Gila Pablo. Hello, Gila.
Yes, hello. Good afternoon, Alma. I'm Gila Pablo from EBC Thailand Bureau, bringing you the latest news and updates around the ASEAN region.
On today's headlines, Indonesian Navy Chief of Staff Yudo Margono says the 53 crew on the missing submarine could have enough oxygen only until tomorrow, Saturday. And time is quickly running out as rescuers scour the coast of the holiday island of Bali where it disappeared. The submarine disappeared.
Indonesia has sentenced scores of prisoners to death over Zoom and other video apps during the pandemic in what critics say is an inhumane insult to those facing the firing squad.
Singapore has quarantined about 1,200 migrant workers from a dormitory after coronavirus cases were discovered among men thought to have already recovered from infections, according to officials.
Drought is an ever-present threat in Southeast Asia, especially to the region's poorest and most vulnerable people. Compared with other disasters, droughts are more predictable, yet policy responses still tend to be largely reactive in ASEAN.
First, Indonesian Navy Chief of Staff Yudo Margono said the 53 crew on the missing submarine could have enough oxygen until early Saturday, and time is quickly running out as rescuers scour the coast of holiday island of Bali where it disappeared. Let's listen in.
Apabila kondisi blackout seperti sekarang ini, kalau diperkirakan blackout itu mampu 72 jam, jadi kurang lebih 3 hari. Sehingga kalau kemarin saat hilang kontak jam 3, hingga nanti bisa sampai hari Sabtu jam 3, sehingga 72 jam. Ya, mudah-mudahan ini sebelum ini dapat segera ditemukan.
Indonesian warships led the hunt on Thursday for the submarine that went missing with the 53 crew on board and only enough oxygen till tomorrow. An oil spill where the submarine was thought to have submerged early on Wednesday pointed to possible damage to its fuel tank and fanned fears of a deadly disaster. The crew on the Cree Nanggala 402 could have enough oxygen till early Saturday, and time is quickly running out.
The U.S. military will send airborne teams to help Indonesia search for a submarine that went missing with 53 sailors aboard, Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said Thursday. Kirby said the U.S. Defense Department was deeply saddened by the news of the lost submarine KRI Nanggala 402 that disappeared Wednesday during exercises off the coast of Bali. Kirby said as the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin planned to speak Friday with Indonesian Defense Chief Prabowo Subianto to convey our sorrow and to discuss how else the United States can be of assistance, according to him. An oil spill where the submarine was thought to have submerged pointed to possible damage to its fuel tank and fanned fears of a deadly disaster. The crew of the German-built vessel could have enough oxygen until early Saturday, but time was quickly running out as rescuers scoured the coast of Bali for signs of its location.
The United Nations chief said that ASEAN's role is more crucial than ever now as the region faces an urgent crisis there. The UN chief urged governments in Southeast Asia to push to end the crisis in Myanmar. Junta leader Min Aung Hlaing is expected to join the summit. Let's listen in.
And on Myanmar, the Secretary General welcomes the convening of the upcoming ASEAN leaders meeting on April 24th, which is set to discuss the current situation in Myanmar. As the Secretary General highlighted in his remarks to the Security Council this week, ASEAN's role is crucial as the region faces an urgent crisis in Myanmar. The Secretary General continues to appeal for a resolute international response grounded in a unified effort. He urges ASEAN leaders to help prevent an escalation of the crisis and possible grave humanitarian implications beyond Myanmar's borders. The UN will remain a vital partner of ASEAN and will lend its full support to its efforts in Myanmar. The Secretary General's Special Envoy Christine Schragner-Bergener remains in the region and will be in Jakarta to engage ASEAN leaders on the sidelines of Saturday's meeting, focusing on a political solution. As of Monday, the UN Human Rights Office said that at least 741 women and children and men have been killed since February 1st. This includes 52 children.
A weekend summit on the Myanmar coup crisis will be a test for ASEAN's credibility and unity, according to a senior Thai official on Thursday, amid an escalating death toll and violence across its western border. Security forces in Myanmar have killed at least 739 people since the February 1 military coup ousted civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi, according to a local monitoring group. The Myanmar military has stepped up the use of lethal force as it seeks to quell mass protests against the junta, with an estimated 250,000 people now displaced, according to UN envoy Tom Andrews. Leaders and foreign ministers from the 10-country Association of Southeast Asian Nations are set to hold talks on the mounting crisis there in Jakarta on Saturday. Coup leader Min Aung Hlaing will travel to Indonesia for the summit, in his first overseas trip since the putsch, according to Nikkei Asia.
The U.S. Treasury placed Myanmar's state-owned timber and pearl businesses on its sanctions blacklist Wednesday, saying they were used to generate revenue for the military regime. The Treasury placed sanctions on Myanmar Timber Enterprise and Myanmar Pearl Enterprise, which are responsible for timber and pearl exports from the former Burma. The sanctions aim to restrict the company's access to the global trading and financial system by forbidding U.S. individuals and companies, including banks with U.S. arms, from doing business with them. The sanctions also freeze any property held by the two companies under U.S. jurisdiction. The sanctions came as Washington seeks to add pressure on the country's military after it ousted civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi and seized power in a February 1 coup. Since then, protests have swept the country and at least 738 people have been killed, and 3,300 are languishing in jails as political prisoners, according to a local monitoring group.
In a related news, the UN Secretary or the UN General Assembly is debating a draft resolution on Myanmar that calls on the junta to restore democracy following a coup and free detained civilian leaders, according to diplomats on Thursday. Leaders and foreign ministers from the 10-country Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or Asean, are set to hold talks in Jakarta on the mounting crisis on Saturday. Now, the sponsors of the text are waiting for the meeting to finish so they can see how it goes before committing to a vote, said a diplomat speaking on condition of anonymity. Unlike with the Security Council, a resolution from the General Assembly would not be binding, but it would ramp up international pressure on the junta. The draft seen by AFP calls on the military in Myanmar to respect the will of the people, to end the state of emergency, and to allow the sustained democratic transition of Myanmar. It also urges the junta immediately to release Suu Kyi, President Win Myint, and others who were arrested. The text doesn't explicitly condemn the coup, however. It calls on the armed forces to immediately stop all violence against the people of Myanmar and let the UN Special Envoy for the country to visit. Several NGOs want an arms embargo imposed on the junta, and the draft seeks an immediate suspension of the direct and indirect supply, sale, or transfer of all weapons, munitions, and other military-related equipment to Myanmar. Since the coup, the Security Council has passed 3 statements on Myanmar, but each time under pressure from China, an ally of Myanmar, the final wording ended up being watered down. The Council has yet to call for any powerful action like sanctions or an arms embargo.
President Rodrigo Duterte continues to engage with state leaders in the Middle East to push for the abolition of kafala, a system widely used in Gulf countries 24 migrant workers. Group sponsors. Presidential Assistant on Foreign Affairs and Chief of Presidential Protocol Robert Borges said Thursday.
Salamat sa tanong. Actually, there's a long-standing partnership bilaterally between the Philippines and our partner countries and the Gulf Coast. Alam ni Yusek Sara yan, and the Department of Foreign Affairs and the Department of Labor and Employment have been at the front lines of engaging our different partners. Kung titingnan nyo ang buong sistema, matagal na ito na partnership. Pero mas napapaigting pa ngayon. Bakit? Dahil at the leaders level na, liderato na ang may direct stake at may direct message on this. Alam ko sa Bahrain, they were working very closely with the Philippines para ma-implement yung kanilang reform, which is the flexi visa. Yun yung it's the path to regularization para sa ating mga kapatid na hindi regular doon, na walang papeles. We've been working with them very closely on the system, on how it's going to be done. And it's the same. Nung nagkaroon na itong sistema na ito sa Bahrain, we pushed forward and we moved to other countries. We had Saudi Arabia, which right now has the Labor Reform Initiative. Pero sa likod po ng ito, at tahimik po, si Pangulong Duterte ay sumusulat sa kanyang mga counterparts, sa mga leaders, their majesties, the kings, pagkatapos nagpapadala ng mga special envoys. Kung may pagkakataon, ay pinaparating ni Pangulong Duterte ang kanyang saloobin. At patuloy ito na nangyayari hanggang ngayon. In fact, even as we speak, I think because of the forum on migration, a lot of governments from the Middle East, from Gulf Coast countries, are reaching out again to the Department of Foreign Affairs, which hosted that meeting, to find out ways to not only move it forward, but to move it forward a little bit faster. And importante po ito, ang pagbabago hindi naman mangyayari ng mabilisan dahil of course iba-ibang stakeholders. Pero pagbabago na lahat tayo ay laging umaabanse at ito'y patuloy na nangyayari, hindi tayo nagre-retreat, ay mahalaga. At importante po talaga dito ang role ng ating pamahalaan at lalong-lalo na ng presidente. When he needs to speak, he speaks so with a strong and principled voice, because for the President, non-negotiable ang respect for the human rights of our foreign overseas Filipino workers and all migrants in general, whatever their status is. So patuloy po kami magtatrabaho on this.
Borge acknowledged that Kapala's abolition will not happen overnight. But for him, the constructive partnership among concerned countries is already a welcome development to open doors for dialogue and to address the labor issue. Kafala originated from the Arabic word which means sponsorship under this system. A worker cannot leave the employer or transfer for better working conditions without the consent of the present employer sponsor. Last Tuesday, President Duterte said this system is unjust and exploitative as it places thousands of migrant workers in the most vulnerable situation, unseen, unheard, and unable to defend their dignity as a human being.
In other news, the United States Embassy in Manila said Washington is working with the Philippines to strengthen its maritime domain awareness and ability to secure its territory amid reports of illegal fishing in the West Philippine Sea. Embassy Charge d'Affaires John Law said the U.S. government shares the country's concerns over environmental destruction as well as illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing in its waters. Encountering illegal and unreported or IUU fishing remains a top priority for the U.S. and through USAID or United States Agency for International Development. And he said we are stepping up our partnership with the Philippines to promote sustainable fishing practices and enhance the well-being of Filipinos dependent on this critical resource. He said this in a virtual media roundtable on Thursday. And he added there's no greater existential threat to the environment and livelihood of fisherfolk than the destruction of rich marine ecosystem in the West Philippine Sea. Law cited a report that illegally caught fish in Philippine waters is estimated to be worth 63 billion pesos a year, and that about 40% of the fish caught in 2019 may well have been illegally fished. Meanwhile, he echoed the statement of State Secretary Antony Blinken that a strong Philippine-U.S. alliance is vital to a free and open Indo-Pacific region.
President Putin gives personal pledge to sell Sputnik V vaccine to Thailand. Let's hear more from Gretchen Kusatsad, our EBC Thailand correspondent. Gretchen?
Yes, Julia, good afternoon.
Okay, before we go to our EBC Thailand Bureau, let's first go to a short break and we'll be right back.
The extended quarantines compelled us to continue doing things online, and for some of our children, and I'm sure a lot of adults out there was more time to spend on their favorite RPGs or role-playing video games. RPGs are presenting incredible universes with high fantasy kingdoms. We see knights and different worlds, all products of creativity and imagination. The good news is video gamers now have an option to play Filipino-designed games that place Philippine pop culture, history, and tradition in the gaming experience. Today, we will showcase the talents and skills of Filipinos in creating and developing game and mobile applications that incorporate the Filipino culture for both local and international audiences.
So I want sa mga kabataan na gawing passion yung gaming, not because na maging addictive, and also para bigyan ng goals sarili mo. Hindi yung enjoyment ang kailangan mo. Kailangan mo is to learn something. Use the gaming para magkaroon ka ng sariling goal.
John Marie Luistro, the president of Boom Brain Studio, will join us in this episode, Open for Business.
Welcome back. Indonesia has sentenced scores of prisoners to death over Zoom and other video apps during the pandemic in what critics say is an inhumane insult to those facing the firing squad. Indonesia turned to virtual court hearing as COVID-19 restrictions shut down most in-person trials, including murder and drug trafficking cases, which can carry the death penalty. Since early last year, almost 100 inmates have been condemned to die in Indonesia by judges they could only see on a television monitor, according to Amnesty International. The Muslim-majority nation has some of the world's toughest drug laws, and both Indonesian and foreign traffickers have been executed, including the masterminds of Australia's Bali 9 heroin gang. Now, this month, 13 members of a trafficking ring, including 3 Iranians and a Pakistani, learned via video that they would be shot for smuggling 400 kilograms or 880 pounds of methamphetamine into Indonesia. And on Wednesday, a Jakarta court sentenced 6 Islamist militants to death using a video app over their role in a 2018 prison riot that left 5 members of Indonesia's counter-terror squad dead. Virtual hearings degrade the rights of defendants facing death sentences. It's about someone's life and death, according to Amnesty International Indonesia Director Usman Hamid. And then he added, the death penalty has always been a cruel punishment, but this online trend adds to the injustice and inhumanity.
President Putin gives a personal pledge to sell Sputnik V vaccine to Thailand. Again, let's listen more from Gretchen Kasadsad, our EBC Thailand correspondent.
Yes, Sheila, good afternoon. On the report of Bangkok Post, Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha announced on Thursday that Russian President Vladimir Putin has personally vowed to support Thailand's COVID-19 battle and will therefore be selling his country's Sputnik V vaccine. He revealed on his Facebook page that Russian President Vladimir Putin had agreed to make the Sputnik jabs available to Thailand via a government-to-government contract. He said the ministry had since been told Mr. Putin had promised to support Thailand because the two countries had long established friendly ties, and the scheme would serve to further strengthen them. Meanwhile, the Public Health Minister announced on Thursday that the Pfizer representative had agreed to sell 10 million doses of the company's vaccine for Thailand, even though it is not specified when the delivery would be made. A total of 2.12 million doses of 2 vaccines, AstraZeneca and Sinovac Coronavac, had been delivered to Thailand and are being distributed across the country to priority groups, including medical personnel and those in high-risk areas. The mass rollout is expected to begin in June, when the first 6 million doses of the locally made AstraZeneca vaccine are rolled out. 10 million doses are expected in the next 5 months and another 5 million doses in December. General Prayut Chan-o-cha also vowed on Wednesday that the government would purchase 35 million more doses of COVID-19 vaccine in addition to the 65 already being procured. If the vaccine GILA procurement and rollout goes as planned, Thailand will have at least 100 million doses and achieve its immunization goals. And Gilio, we also have here a new update for the COVID-19 situation in Thailand. 2,070 new infections today, and we already have 50,183 cumulative total. And there are 121 death tolls. That is the latest report here in Bangkok, Thailand. Gila. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Gretchen. Stay safe and healthy, and happy weekend to you.
Likewise, Dila. This is Gretchen. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, Gretchen. The Philippines is expected to receive about 20 million doses of the coronavirus vaccines developed by Russia's Gamaleya Research Institute within this year. That, according to Philippine ambassador in Moscow, Carlos Sureta, on Tuesday. In the next few days, the ambassador said the first 20,000 vials will be delivered followed by at least 500,000 doses before the end of April or early May. Let's listen in.
Well, when it comes to the vaccine, we're looking at 5 figures within the next few days, or 20,000 will be coming to the Philippines. And shortly after that, before the end of April or early May, we're looking at 6 figures, almost 500,000. And over the next few months, we're going 7 figures, so about 20 million doses before the end of the year. We are very happy about this development, and although it took a while, it was unavoidable. The FDA, ginagawa ho nila yung kanilang trabaho, ngunit meron konti mga differences, terminologies, technologies. So those have been overcome. And I think there will be a delivery as scheduled based on the agreement signed by Secretary Galvez. Oh, I'm sorry, the temperature department. My understanding is we have complied with their requirements because they would not deliver unless they're satisfied na yung logistics side po natin. Kaya yung unang 20,000, yun po ay gagamitin para ma-fine-tune yung logistics on our end.
Now, he also said that the Philippine Embassy in Moscow is also monitoring the vaccine production and has been engaging with different firms tapped to produce the shots in Russia. According to Russian news agency TASS, Sputnik V may be stored at 2 to 8 degrees centigrade for 2 months, but developers are hoping to extend this for up to 6 months.
Singapore has quarantined about 1,200 migrant workers from a dormitory after coronavirus cases were discovered among men thought to have already discovered or recovered from infections, officials said. Vast dormitories housing mostly South Asian workers were at the center of Singapore's initial outbreak last year, with the majority of the city-state's cases in the self-contained complexes. The country's outbreak has largely been brought under control with just a handful of infections detected daily. But the discovery of new cases among foreign workers has prompted fears the dorms could be hit again. Earlier this week, a virus case was discovered in the West Light Woodlands dormitory in a worker who had already received both doses of a COVID-19 vaccine. Authorities conducted further tests at the site, and another 17 workers thought to have already recovered from earlier infections have tested positive for COVID-19, health officials said. Tan Si Leng, minister in the Prime Minister's office, said late Thursday, I quote, "To prevent and contain the possible spread of infection in the dormitory, we imposed quarantine orders on workers at the affected block," end of quote. Officials are investigating whether the workers were infected or if they are still shedding the virus from earlier infections. Singapore last month started vaccinating foreign workers who do low-paying jobs in industries ranging from construction to maintenance.
Also happening this week, Cambodia imposed lockdowns in the capital Phnom Penh and a nearby city as its strongman premier Hun Sen warned that spiraling COVID-19 cases have put Cambodia on the brink of death. Let's take a look.
Workers at a field hospital in rural Bangkok prepare beds made out of cardboard to receive COVID-19 patients. The country is facing a wave of infections due to a highly infectious variant first detected in the UK. Stay tuned because ASEAN in Focus will be right back after this break.
San man tayo maglakbay, sila ang ating kaagapay. Suot-suot natin, mapadaan man sa patag o lubak ng buhay.
Family nung asawa ko, mga magchichanelas sila dito sa Liliw, Laguna.
Ang sapatos kasi kasama si na tawag na mga basic needs. No?
Sobrang tibay po talaga niya. Parang bibilangin ng taon bago po siya masira.
Kaya kung nagnanais kayong pumasok sa kabuhayang ito, aba siyempre, tutulungan namin kayo dyan.
Unti-unti ko nang pinag-aralan kung paano lahat patakbuhin ang negosyo sa paggawa ng sapatos dito sa Marikina.
Dumami-dami na yung mga order sa amin. Kaya sabi ko, ano kaya kung tayo na kaya ang gumawa?
Business namin na nabubuhay at nagpaaral po sa aming magkakapatid.
Baka ito na ang negosyong perfect fit para sa inyo. Ako po, si Robin Padilla. At ito po ang ulat. Agapay sa hanap buhay.
Events happen around us all the time. In our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced, eagle news, because we live in interesting times.
Welcome back. Two Indonesian hackers have been arrested over an international scam in which $60 million was stolen from a COVID-19 aid program helping Americans left jobless by the pandemic, according to authorities. Text messages were sent to 20 million Americans directing them to more than a dozen fake U.S. government websites. According to police in the Southeast Asian nation, now thousands of victims supplied personal information. That includes social security numbers to the fake sites in the hopes of securing $2,000 offered under a real assistance program for the unemployed, according to authorities. But their data was instead used by scammers to steal millions of dollars from the program. East Java Police Chief Nico Afinta said some 30,000 U.S. citizens were scammed and the government's financial loss is up to $60 million. The two suspects were arrested last month front and Indonesia's second biggest city, Surabaya, after police were notified by U.S. authorities. Indonesian police did not say how long the scam had been running. The pair could face up to 9 years in prison under Indonesia's electronic information law. Police also said they were investigating the possible involvement of a third person who may have secured funds illicitly.
Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif visits Indonesia and has a meeting with his Indonesian counterpart, Retno Marsudi, in the capital of Jakarta. Indonesia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs said the foreign ministers focus on joint efforts to overcome the coronavirus pandemic and accelerate economic recovery. According to the Islamic Republic news agency, Zarif voiced Tehran's readiness to continue with talks with Jakarta on preferential tariff agreement. Zarif hailed the principled stance of Indonesia at the UN Secretary Council to save the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, known as JCPOA, and to help support the implementation of the UNSC Resolution 2231. The Indonesian foreign minister, for her part, lauded the growing relations between the two countries on different areas, including the economic sector, expressing hope that both countries will facilitate bilateral trade by the Joint Trade Commission and agreements under study. During his visit, Zarif also met Indonesian President Joko Widodo.
The U.S. Treasury rolled back a Trump-era accusation that Switzerland and Vietnam were manipulating their exchange rates to gain a competitive trade advantage, saying on Friday there was insufficient evidence for this charge. Take a look. While Treasury withdrew the manipulator label, the two countries continue to meet the criteria for scrutiny of their currency policies and were joined by Taiwan, according to the semi-annual report to Congress. China also remains on Treasury's monitoring list after being removed from the ranks of currency manipulators in January 2020, just before then-President Donald Trump signed an initial trade pact with Beijing. Beijing has long been a target of scrutiny under the report, and Washington has frequently accused the government of keeping the exchange rate artificially low using its massive stockpile of U.S. dollars. The watch list also includes Japan, Korea, Germany, Italy, India, Malaysia, Singapore, and Thailand, as well as Ireland and Mexico, which were added to the December list. Congress requires the twice-yearly analysis to single out countries that might be actively trying to keep their currencies weaker against the U.S. dollar, which would make their exports cheaper while making American goods more expensive. The Swiss National Bank, or SNB, protested the December designation as a manipulator, and in a statement on Friday again denied any inappropriate activity. The Swiss franc has long been considered a safe haven currency, meaning investors scurry to buy it in times of crisis, pushing up its value and causing the SNB to intervene.
The Armed Forces of the Philippines is augmenting its presence in the West Philippine Sea with their help of other government agencies capable of doing maritime patrols, its chief said on Thursday. General Cirilito Sobihana said in a virtual press conference they are currently augmenting as far as our operations West Philippine Sea is concerned, and that their air and naval assets in support to the National Task Force for the West Philippine Sea and working alongside with the Philippine Coast Guard and the Bureau of the Fisheries and Aquatic Resources. End of quote. Sobihana said that the AFP currently has 10 naval assets doing sovereignty patrols. He added that the military is documenting every violation China is committing against the country's exclusive economic zone and forwarding to the Department of Foreign Affairs in support of their diplomatic protest. The MTF-WPS earlier expressed concern over a Coast Guard report about 200 Chinese fishing vessels believed to be manned by Chinese maritime militia personnel sighted in line formation at the Julian Felipe Reef on March 7. The reef is located approximately 175 nautical miles west of Bataraza, Palawan.
Hi, sir. So hanggang
Malacanang confirmed that Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga has postponed his planned official visit to the Philippines. In a statement, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque disclosed the Japanese Prime Minister made the decision to first focus on the COVID-19 crisis in Japan. I quote, defeating the COVID-19 pandemic is high on both the Philippines and Japan's agenda and remains a key point of cooperation, end of quote, according to Roque said. The decision to postpone a planned official visit based on this ground therefore deserves support, he added. Despite the deferred visit, Roque said the country's strategic partnership and broad cooperation with Japan will remain strong. The Japanese government is expected to decide this week if it will declare a state of emergency in some parts of Japan to address the latest surge of COVID-19 cases in the said areas.
Now, when the COVID-19 pandemic first began, several ASEAN members took steps to restrict exports while others impeded imports. Now, such actions concurrently led to short-term price increases in importing countries and for their consumers, and concomitant short-term price declines and lower income prospects for producers in exporting countries. Here are the pandemic's implications on agriculture, food consumption, production, trade in ASEAN.
Firstly, my heartfelt gratitude to the frontline worker tackling the COVID-19 pandemic. As the pandemic unfolded in early 2020, some of leaders became wary of the pandemic potential to disrupt agri-food value chain activity and food security. Consequently, we commissioned a research study through the Canadian Trade and Investment Facility for development project funded by the Government of Canada. The Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada was invited to undertake research on the COVID-19 impact on ASEAN agri-food value chain and trade. Our objective was to better understand the pandemic ramifications and policy action needed to recover in the post-pandemic phase. This initiative from some leaders as well as the statement of ASEAN Minister on Agriculture and Forestry in response to the outbreak of COVID-19 in April 2020 display the collective and collaborative effort of the whole of ASEAN to mitigate the impact of COVID-19. We hope that you find our main report useful in addressing the shared challenge we all face related to the COVID-19.
Vaccines are designed to give you immunity without the dangers of getting the disease. It's common to experience some mild to moderate side effects when receiving vaccinations. Now, this is because your immune system instructs your body to increase blood flow so more immune cells can circulate, and it raises your body temperature to kill the virus. Here's a video from the World Health Organization.
When a virus enters the body fights back. Common symptoms, like a fever or chills, are the result of our immune system attacking the virus by increasing blood flow and raising our temperature. Vaccines are designed to activate the immune system in the same way, but without making us sick. While it's normal to build immunity without side effects, it's also normal for some people to experience mild to moderate symptoms after being vaccinated, like pain at the injection site, fever, and chills. These side effects usually last a few days and go away on their own. Vaccines help protect us against disease, and feeling mild or moderate side effects after receiving one is a sign that the vaccine and our immune system is working.
Drought is an ever-present threat in Southeast Asia, especially to the poorest and most vulnerable people. Compared with other disasters, droughts are more predictable, yet policy responses still tend to be largely reactive.
Drought can be devastating. It can ravage agriculture and the environment and impact both villages and cities. It can lead to disaster. It can affect an entire region. Southeast Asia has endured 2 severe droughts in the last 5 years, impacting about 70% of the region's land area and 60% of its people. Up to 1/4 of the region's population live in a drought hotspot. With climate change on track to create a warmer world, more droughts like these are on the horizon. We need to be ready for the dry years ahead. Working with the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, ASEAN is preparing against this intensifying threat of drought. A joint ESCAP and ASEAN report, Ready for the Dry Years, recommends that Southeast Asian policymakers build resilience to drought by focusing on 3 key policy areas. 1. Reduce and prevent droughts from occurring. 2. Prepare and respond to droughts when they happen. And 3. Restore and recover after a drought has passed. Of course, Southeast Asia is currently besieged by another crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic. But drought adaptation strategies can underpin and reinforce many COVID-19 recovery plans. The world is warming, the climate is changing, and the incidence and severity of drought will increase in the future. ASEAN members must build collective, adaptive, and long-term drought policies to meet this challenge. Together, we can be ready for the dry years.
Happy Earth Day, Gila.
Same to you, Alma. And thank you for having me today. Again, I'm Gila Pablo, bringing you the latest news and update in the ASEAN region. Again, khopun ka mak-mak tukon naka. And I'm leaving you this simple reminder to everyone for this weekend to stay healthy and safe because we live in interesting times.
Thank you, Gila. And before we go, I'd like to greet our friend and someone who helps us here on ASEAN in Focus, Princess Alvarez. A very happy birthday. She celebrated her pandemic birthday with us. Happy birthday, sis. And that is happy weekend. And stay safe, everyone. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you back next week. And that is the latest news in the Southeast Asian nations. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.